predicted with considerable accuracy where the dummies would impact. I specifically recall a dummy I recovered near the Jornada test range between Leesburg and Oregon, New Mexico. During this recovery, I drove a weapons carrier and I was only able to locate one of the dummies. I never found out what happened to the other one. The next recovery I remember was on a ranch just southwest of Roswell by the Balloon Branch personnel who had been contacted by a rancher. The equipment had reward notices taped to them to aid in recovery. We went to the Smith Ranch. I remember the name because I went to New Mexico A&M with the rancher. I knew him as Smitty. We searched that day from horseback and could not find the dummies. The following day we resumed our search from horseback and again could not find the dummies. I also recall that Smitty asked us for some of the parachute material so he could make a shirt. We dropped many dummies from the balloons, and I know many were not immediately recovered, but most were. I served for 25 years in the Air Force, and most of those years were in the aeromedical field. I participated in the space program and the highly classified early stages of the U-2 program. Never during this time were aliens or flying saucers a part of any project. There were, however, countless achievements by the Air Force in aerospace medicine that were the result of dedicated scientific research. It seems likely to me that someone could have mistaken our anthropomorphic dummies for something that they were not. I am not a part of any conspiracy to withhold or provide misleading information to the United States government or the American public. There is no classified information that I am withholding related to this inquiry, and I have never been threatened by U.S. government persons concerning refraining from talking about this matter. Signed, Raymond A. Madsen, Lieutenant Colonel, U.S. Air Force, retired. Statement of Witness. Date, 25 April 1996. Place, Aztec, New Mexico. I, Frank B. Nordstrom, M.D., hereby state that James McAndrew was identified as a captain, U.S. Air Force Reserve, on this date at my home, and do hereby, voluntarily and of my own free will, make the following statement. This was done without having been subjected to any coercion, unlawful influence, or unlawful inducement. I was on active duty in the U.S. Air Force and stationed at Walker Air Force Base, Roswell, New Mexico, from July 1951 until June 1953. During that time, I was a pediatrician assigned to the base hospital. Following my tour of duty with the Air Force, I attended the University of Colorado as a resident in pediatrics. In July 1954, I relocated to Farmington, New Mexico, and began a private pediatric practice. I retired from private practice in 1987 and became the medical director of the San Juan Regional Medical Center, which is also located in Farmington, New Mexico. In 1989, I retired from that position and presently reside in Aztec, New Mexico. I have been shown 2 transcripts of interviews where an individual named Glenn Dennis described conversations and visits he claims he had with a pediatrician in the late 1940s or early 1950s in Farmington, New Mexico. According to these interviews, Mr. Dennis also claims that this pediatrician had previously served at the hospital at Walker Air Force Base / Roswell Army Airfield. Since I am the only physician in Farmington, New Mexico who previously served at the Walker Air Force Base / Roswell Army Airfield Hospital, I believe I am the person he is referring to in these interviews. I am confident of this because I know I was the first pediatrician to practice in Farmington, which when I arrived in 1954 was a small community of approximately 8,000 people. I remained the sole pediatrician there for approximately 20 years, and I know most, if not all, of the physicians in the area. Even though I believe I am the person Mr. Dennis referred to in the interviews, I do not remember him. I can state with reasonable certainty that I cannot recall any conversations with him, and he, to my knowledge, never visited me in Farmington, New Mexico, in Colorado, or any place else. I have been told, however, that a person named Glenn Dennis operated a drugstore in the late 1950s, early 1960s, just outside Farmington in Aztec, New Mexico, but I do not recall any contact with him there either. While I was stationed at Walker Air Force Base, I do not recall any incidents that may explain the information Mr. Dennis provided in the interviews. To my knowledge, there was only one fatal aircraft accident during my tour of duty, and that accident involved a Walker Air Force Base-based aircraft in the United Kingdom. I was not involved in any aspect of that accident. I also do not recall any other incidents such as automobile accidents or house fires that may be the source of this information, nor do I recall a nurse named Lieutenant Naomi Self or a nurse named Captain Slats Wilson. While at Walker Air Force Base, I did not witness or hear rumors of anything that involved flying saucers, aliens, or anything else of an extraterrestrial nature. I am not part of a conspiracy to withhold information from either the U.S. government or the American public. There is no classified information that I am withholding related to this inquiry, and I have not been threatened by U.S. government persons concerning not talking about this matter. Signed, Frank B. Nordstrom, M.D. End of Section 11. Recording by Aaron Bennett. Section 12 of the Roswell Report, Case Closed, by James McAndrew. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Aaron Bennett. The Roswell Report, Case Closed, by James McAndrew. Appendix C, Part 1, Interviews. Appendix C, Transcript of Interview with Gerald Anderson, alleged first-hand witness to Crash Site 2, allegedly 175 miles northwest of Roswell. Footnote: excerpted from raw footage used to prepare the video Recollections of Roswell Part 2, Washington, D.C., Fund for UFO Research, 1993. End of footnote. Anderson: we drove down to the plains of San Augustine, which is west of Socorro, New Mexico, in the Magdalena-Daddle area. We were down there looking for banded and moss agate, which according to my Uncle Ted and my cousin Victor was prevalent in the area. My brother, being an amateur rockhound, had wanted to get some of this. That was a way of showing us around the area. They had relatives down in Magdalena that they wanted to introduce us to. So we had gone down there, and we got down in the Horse Springs area, rutted road for, a mile or so, and it seemed like a long ways. We parked the car, got out of the car, and walked down a hillside. There's a semi-forest, I guess you could say. It had pinyon trees and scrub oak and stuff like that on it, and we walked, well, not scrub oak, but cedar, and walked down the hillside into an arroyo, a dry wash, and then walked south down a dry wash toward where the agates were supposed to be at. As we came around a bend in the arroyo that had pinyon and cedar trees growing, we were able to see farther ahead down the arroyo, and on the next ridgeline there was a large silver disc-shaped object was embedded in this side of the ridgeline. There was debris and wreckage strewn about the area, mainly this thing was intact. I would estimate its size from an adult perspective to something like 35 feet in diameter. I've heard other people who were there say they thought it was like 50 feet, but as an adult, I would say about 35 feet in diameter, quite large. When we got up to it, there were 4 bodies there, not human. There was 2 of them that were obviously dead, one of them was obviously very badly injured, and one of them apparently suffered no ill effects, or it didn't appear to be injured and was ambulatory, was mobile. It was just sitting there next to the one. Question: were they right next to the vehicle? Anderson: right next to it, right under the edge of it, and this craft had apparently come in from the east and bounced off one ridgeline, plowing through this arroyo area and then crashed into the ridgeline and embedded itself. They were sitting back under the edge. It was kind of tilted up like this, and they were sitting back under the edge here. And I'm assuming that this one creature that was alright had laid this material on the ground, but it looked like unrolled tinfoil that these other 3 creatures were laying on. Like it was trying, like you do a person in shock, you know, put him on a blanket, that kind of thing. And apparently it had some boxes there around it and had apparently been trying to give first aid or help these other creatures when we first got there. As we approached, the creature drew back like this, like it was in fear, like we were going to hurt it. And it wasn't very long, you know, we were trying to communicate with it, the adults were. It seemed to calm down and just sat there and kind of looked back and forth watching them, apparently trying to figure out what was going on. Question: what did it look like? A little bit more. Anderson: these creatures, all of them were, about 4 foot tall, 4.5 feet tall. They had very large heads that were shaped larger on the top, and they kind of tapered down. Not to a real sharp point, but just tapered down where they were thin. And they had very large, oval-shaped or almond-shaped, I guess you could say, black eyes. The head, they were so shiny, they had almost a bluish tint to them when the light reflected off of them. Their skin coloration, the best way that I could describe that is it was kind of a bluish tinted milky white. It looked like someone in shock. And the ones that were laying on the ground were really looked more that way, more blue in the light, you know. Question: how about ears, nose, mouth? Anderson: no, there were no visible ears on the creatures except like if you was just to cover your ear like this to where there was just a rise there and then a hole without. You know, your earlobe and the rest of the area. Question: how about nose? Anderson: the nose was very small, almost imperceptible. It's like two holes straight in, and the lips were just a straight line. It was like a cut and you couldn't see, just the lips like we have. It was just a slit. And question: what hair color? Sound? Anderson: pardon? Question: what hair color? Anderson: there was no hair. They were completely bald. Question: and no sounds? Anderson: I never heard a sound one, not out of any of the creatures, including the one that was... Question: did you see fingers? Anderson: yes, they had fingers like this. They didn't have a little finger. They just had the thumb and 3 extra digits, except the center digit was longer and the other 2 were about the same size. They were very long and slender and looked very delicate, and I made this statement before and I'll make it again. I think he would have made an excellent violinist because of the structure of their hands. They were wearing one-piece suits. All of them were dressed exactly the same. It was sort of a real shiny silverish gray color. Question: no zippers, buttons? Anderson: no, I saw no zippers, no buttons. Question: insignias? Anderson: no insignias. The only thing that was different, you know, and they all had this, but the only thing that was different from the silvery gray thing, the suit, was that down like a seam line, like there was a seam on his shoulder, and around the collar it was trimmed in what appeared to be maroon, like cording. Then the suits were continuous with their footwear. We could see right this area down. It seemed to be less pliable than it was up here, like this was a stiffer area, like they were boots or shoes or something, but they were all dressed exactly the same. Question: okay, so you and your family are talking back and forth, wondering what was going on. What did your family say? I mean... Anderson: well... Question: did they say anything? Anderson: yes, my brother, one of his first remarks I heard him say, "That's a goddamn spaceship. You know, there were bodies up there, and you know, I was told not to go up there, which I didn't, and..." Question: how old was your brother at the time? Anderson: he was in his early 20s, I think. 20, 21, something like that. Question: he was a lot older than you were? Anderson: oh, yes, considerably. When we got up there, I kind of meandered off to one side. This thing was cocked up and I was standing here, the bodies were here, and everybody else was kind of down here, except my cousin Victor was over here playing and looking in this gaping hole on the side of this disc. And it was shaped just like a discus, except for a round dome was up on top, and there was this big gaping gash in there. We could see inside, and it looked like a double hole.